For today. I'm just going to share with you that this is our internal agenda item. Our goal is for our IT teachers to consider teaching a full course on cybersecurity, using this curriculum, to use some of the modules in this existing course, and if you'd like, of course, to weave in some of the lessons into your existing courses. The reason that we would encourage you to do that is because, frankly, we want this curriculum to be a living document. We want to keep learning from it, and we did spend quite a bit of time, and as you have seen, and as you'll continue to see, a lot of great human capital of your fellow teachers and cybersecurity experts to build it. So we hope you'll find it useful. The other thing that we really aspire to do is not to have these two sessions together be just discrete occasions to meet, but rather to really start to build a community of cybersecurity educators within New York City DOE, so that we can continue to have these conversations, continue to learn together, and yes, continue to expand this specific curriculum to work with it, to learn from it, and to adapt it if and as we need to. So we will be asking you at the end of this session, so I'd like to just plant this question for you already, of if you are interested in continuing to be part of a community of teachers, a learning community, to keep working on the curriculum, to spend time together thinking about how you can implement it, moving beyond just these 4 hours that we have together. Let us know. We'll ask you at the end of the session if that's something you'd like to do, and then we can think together about how we might organize that. And I know that at least one of our trainers is very interested in continuing to build that community forth. So think about that as you go through the session today. All right, this is the holy grail. Here it is. Access again to the curriculum. And here now is our agenda. So as I mentioned, really, this is a deep dive for us today on the technical skills of cybersecurity. So Damiano, do you want to give us an overview of what we'll be doing and then talk about your group? And then we can have Amaris and Chris also showcase what they'll be working on with their groups.
Yeah, thank you. So in a moment, we're going to be able to break apart into one of 3 groups. All of these groups will be recorded and all of their instructional training materials will be provided as both a look back for whatever session you decide to attend, and then also ramp up or ramp down materials in case you feel like you need a recoverage or want to revisit some of the materials for yourself just to solidify your knowledge and skills. Each group has been defined separately into a beginner, intermediate, and expert type level. And so in a moment, Amaris and Chris will share what their sessions are about. For those of you that may consider yourselves more of a beginner, my session specifically, and so this is what Group A will be about, we'll cover a lot of the theoretical basis of cybersecurity, but we'll also take a look at ethical behavior using cybersecurity tools. What are threats and threat actors that get involved in cybersecurity attacks? How are different areas of cybersecurity defined for identity management, basic cryptography information, and protecting data? How do you securely identify good emails, ones that are not potentially infected or misleading? And then some basics about network security. And so for my session, that is what the general topics will be for the novice group. I will then pass it along to Amaris, who will describe the general goals and content of his session.
Hey guys, so in my session is going to be focused on network packets and how to determine malicious packets or malicious payloads on the network, how to analyze phishing emails by utilizing different resources that are available on the internet, open source applications, how to take a look at the email header, how to analyze, who is it coming from, what is the IP address, and so forth, being able to read and interpret threat intelligence report, just gathering information, intelligence information about your target, about just just random information that's available on the internet, some information that are not available on the internet, that are private, but somehow it came up in the internet, and how to do vulnerability scan on the machines, on the nodes.
Thanks, Maurice. And then for Group C, we'll go through, we're calling it more the expert level, but that will include things around how to develop a threat model. So a lot of it is a culmination of what Damiano mentioned, Maurice had mentioned. And so threat model is an example. Building a threat intelligence report is another example. And then really drilling into common, web vulnerabilities, web application vulnerabilities, and even exploring the use of Metasploit, which is a common tool used to break into systems. So we'll definitely drill into some of those areas, and then from a more management skill set, we'll explore just really how anyone could really manage through an overall security incident. So we'll go through some scenarios on that for the expert level.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. So take a minute to think about which group you might like to be in. Just to whip through the rest of our agenda today, we'll then regroup, debrief a little bit, hear some thoughts from folks if we have that time. Then we will share some announcements. We have a very special guest coming at what time, Jessica?
Around 6:15.
Around 6:15. So be sure to come back to the group. If you get lost in the spheres of Zooms and Google meetings, this is our incentive to bring you back. And then again, we'll talk about some of those next steps, including how we can convene again as a group. So Jessica, do you want to walk us through the logistics?
Yes. So the way that we're going to do this time, if you want to go to the next slide, is for anyone that wants to stick with Group A, you can just stay here in this Zoom gathering. And then in the chat box, there are Google Meets links, not to be confused with the Zoom link for this meeting, that you can just go and head to. So you'll see Group B with Maurice is listed there, and then in the chat box, and then you'll see the link for Chris. And Chris and Maurice, when you're ready to go, you can hop off now and get onto that other group. And we'll see you back here in about 90 minutes. We'll send you both some reminders so you know when you should be coming back. So everyone, again, if you want to stick in this group, just stay here. Or if you'd like to join those other groups, feel free to.
Hi, Jessica.
Yep.
The resources, say I go to one group, the resources from the other groups are going to be available too?
Yeah. So we're recording everything.
And that's why we're using multiple modalities. The logistics behind switching between Zoom and others is we can't record breakout sessions in this, and we want to capture that. And so we're sending you off into a different mode of connectivity so that we can record those sessions. But yes, everything will be available for everyone. If you feel for whatever reason that you want to drop into one, drop into another, obviously feel free to do that too. We want you to maximize the learning experience for yourself.
And one quick message to Chris and Maurice, depending on how long you go, if you want to return back, feel free to, or if no one's in your group, come on back here. I'm trying to say, it looks like hasn't been much movement. We've got another, the popular group A here. Is anyone left?
So I think one person just
One
moved.
person did, okay.
But the whole point of having these 3 separate sessions is that even if somebody weren't to go to them, there's still a type of instructional material available. So that way everybody's using their time wisely. More people are now hopping to other groups. And so that's great. And so you should go to a group that you're most comfortable with, and regardless of where you fall or where you think you believe you should be, you'll have access to all 3 essential trainings. You get a 3-in-1.
And I'll just make a plug for the advanced and intermediate ones. Sorry, Damiano, but it is almost like getting a preview of what the ultimate goal is for this course, right? Or the ultimate goal, like doing something like a threat model, is really exciting, because if you hear the advanced content, you get to gauge where ultimately you want to be as a teacher. So that's my plug for Chris, who I see has left now. All right, I think I'm gonna go ahead and leave as well. See
All
ya.
right. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay then, folks.
Should I log off from the Zoom?
Yep, you can. See you in a little bit, Maurice.
All right, see you.
All right, so welcome, Group A. Whether you are new to this or you just feel like you want to start at the beginning, welcome. We're going to have a good time. I don't think that there's going to be any problems. And so as a reminder, there's a few things that we're going to go over. But the first thing is, who is this dude? Who is this guy talking to you right now? My name's Damiano. The reason why I'm here today and not just some random person off of the street trying to give you professional development is that I'm a teacher just like you. Okay, so I know what it's like to be in a classroom. I have a degree in cybersecurity, which is not all encompassing, but definitely puts me, a step up towards the right direction. And I'm always thinking about how are we going to make this, even better. So, just in case you're like, who is this dude? I've never seen him before. Like maybe slowly I can put those puzzle pieces together. There are some basic training norms. Be curious, be respectful, be present, and be you. I can't ask for anything else from any of you. If you have questions, go for it. If you need to know something, unmute yourself. If you want to be a chat box gremlin, do it. Like I will check the chat box as you go. And so it's no big deal about how you want to do this because I can see it all at one time. In terms of what we're trying to accomplish today, okay, and because this is being recorded, you can always come back to it, are these 5 general items. These are going to kind of set you ahead and ready to go for when you need to begin the beginner lessons in the curriculum. And those are spread out, but we're going to first start with a conversation about ethics, and there will be some questions for the audience, so you are going to get involved. Number 2, we're going to talk about what are threat and threat actors. If you've taught cybersecurity in any form, you've probably used the terminology inside of that category before, but maybe you just haven't heard of those words before. Number 3 is a little mishmash of a whole bunch of like theoretical basis items, but we'll try to contextualize it for you. Number 4, we've got an interactive activity for you to check out the problems with emails and things you can work with your students for. And the last one will be on the features of network security. And although we won't be going into a deep dive of the actual activities, those things will show up in the intermediate version of the training that Maurice is doing. So there's going to be various overlaps. So if you watch these essentially in order, you can kind of find a progression of skill and a progression of like work of how it all comes together. With that being said, I also took the time to just pull out specific lessons that align to these 5 objectives. So in case you're just like, where does this content live? Where does this information really stick out? So that way I can be like, oh, what happened in the training is right here in this lesson. I tried to do that for you. You notice that I jumped around a little bit. It's not every single unit. But that doesn't mean that you can't use it in a variety of spaces. And so you should take your time, and whether you're going to do the full course or just part of it or just pick and choose, you'll be able to identify like, hey, that kind of aligns to what I'm trying to accomplish already. And so I'm going to pull that one out for myself. So the first thing is, just as a very basic thing, we've got what is cybersecurity. With regards to its definition, we can define it in a whole bunch of ways. I'm not here to like cherry pick what is the absolute definition. But the one thing that I did want to, really stress for you right now is that it's always an ongoing process. And security is never done, just like if you're into Harry Potter and you've watched the 4th movie or read the book, even better, there's that character who's like constant vigilance. Mad-Eye Moody, he's telling you the rule of security, like you need to always be on. And so that is kind of what we want to impart on our young people, that This is something that is always going, and there's no end point of like, yep, it's secured, it's safe, I'm done. Because there's no such thing as I'm done. But with regards to like what we're going to cover, the first section again is ethics. So my first question for you would be, what are ethics? And you can feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I am also used to teaching a college class, so if nobody responds, I'm cool with that too. Benroy?
So would you say ethics would be the things that allow you to remain above reproach? Meaning it's the things your grandmother would allow you to do, the things that folks will not uh, frown upon, even though they may not be illegal. It just makes good practice.
Yeah, I would agree with you in saying that not only what you originally said, but how you expanded upon it really extrapolates the true core of ethics. And we have a few people in the chat, giving very similar simplistic summaries of that. Of they're just a set of unspoken rules, but it goes to a little bit further of a step, being morally correct. And so when it comes to things like, like, do we put the cart back after we're done grocery shopping, all the way up to, is it okay to steal if nobody gets hurt? We reach this realm of like philosophy that they call ethics. And so in cybersecurity and with computers in general, they've borrowed from Christianity and Catholicism this concept of 10 commandments, but instead for computer ethics. And so these are, ethical statements that they're essentially saying are morally correct. These are things that we should, unspokenly do when it comes to working with, our computers and, being a cybersecurity agent. Students, will do this is as part of the curriculum. There are the 10 commandments. They are written out. There's a worksheet, a quiz that goes along with it. And so with how this could be used in your classroom, those activities have been broken out. But the real concept and core that we're trying to get students to master is that these lessons should be inherent. They should be built within the self about what is appropriate to do when working with and for and on computer systems. John, I saw you unmute yourself. Is there something you wanted to add?
Oh, yes. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm just wondering how we feel about Google's ethics. I think they have a do no evil.
Yeah. And so if you want to use additional resources to bring in or like hit hard home on something, you can do it. If you want to supplant it completely and be like, here's Google's rules, that's fine, as long as the core concept of, being more morally ethical with the data that you interact with, I think you're on the greatest path that you can achieve. Does that help?
Yeah, I just think it's a bit of a discussion. Maybe just do it.
Yeah. And you can go about it in a variety of different ways. There is like these 10 statements that are written out as is, but you could alternatively do something where students have to, extrapolate the meaning about why is this ethically appropriate, or why is it necessary for what you're trying to accomplish. When you get a copy of this slide deck, you'll actually also have access to all of my speaker notes. And in them, I've provided, especially for this slide, detailed accountings of like, what is the simple version of this, quote commandment, and what is the full explanation about why this is important. And so, in a variety of aspects, like making sure that we don't hurt one another, making sure that we're not doing something illicit or, illegal, is like all of what we're essentially trying to avoid, for the betterment of everybody. And, when it comes to, ethical considerations, we want to also do something else. And that is impart upon students their actions have consequences. And so what does that mean? In the most simplest way of describing it, these students are using tools that are very real in the class. They are not made up, simulated, technology that they are just doing in a sandbox that can't hurt anybody. If they are using the port scanners, if they are using the network sniffer, they potentially have a level of ramifications that if used improperly, they can get in trouble for, and potentially you. And so it's really important that, and Amaris can definitely speak better to this than I can, that you should always drive home the importance of ethics within any lesson that involves the tools that you are teaching, for the whole purpose of protecting oneself as well as the students. You can bring in, and if that works for you, a student contract with the commandments in it. You can also design your own or have your students build them together. But you also want to address the other ethical areas that are involved beyond the fact that the self needs to be preserved. And that is the testing environment and unauthorized access. We are going to be working on a variety of things that, you don't have permission to have access to. And so if that is the circumstance, or that is the case, you're entering this field of do not go there, do not do this thing. And so it's a little bit more of a recommendation, bordering a mandatory practice of being very cautious with what you do, especially with your students. And really, if you're not sure, do the research that's involved in it, because the worst case scenario is you end up with something that has a repercussion that can affect your livelihood. And we don't want that to happen to any student. We definitely do not want that to happen to you. And so with ethical hacking as an example, if you don't have permission to do the thing on a certain resource, like a web server that's on a website that you don't own, you shouldn't do it. If somebody says that you can't do a test on a folder because you don't own it, then you don't do it. Sometimes it seems like common sense. They're more of these, like Stacy put it, unspoken rules, but bringing them to life, speaking them aloud, may be the catalyst for changing the mind of what a student thinks is acceptable to what isn't. So how can we do this? We can impart ethical thinking on students in a few ways. One of them, which to John's point, was to have a discussion about the rules, the ethical morality requirements. We can also embed them directly into our classroom procedures. Students can't administer a port scan or use any of the cyber tools unless they receive permission or get a sign off on a form to do so. You can also, really highlight those mishandling repercussions. What happens if you make a mistake? What happens if you scan something you're not supposed to? And then, of course, not to scare children, but, acknowledging the fact that not only are we using real tools, but if improperly used, there can be legal and criminal consequences. I personally recommend cybersecurity for a slightly older group than 10th grade, especially since they may not be in the mindset to do that, but it's still possible. You also want to run practice scenarios to act ethically. And so we're actually going to take a look at those right now. On this slide, we have two ethical scenarios. In the first one, we have a penetration tester. And in the second one, we have a computer support agent. And so what we'll do is I'll read them aloud for the audience. And then the question will be, is this ethical? So in scenario A, we have Natalia, who works for a financial institution as a penetration tester. She is certain that there's an issue with the new database that they have recently switched over to. Using her knowledge and tools, she conducts a few tests to ensure that it's up to company code. Is this ethical? Okay, so we've got one yes in the chat. You can also feel free to unmute yourself.
I don't know what a penetration tester is, but based on the scenario, I think that, you know, it sounds like it's like she's okay to do that.
Stacy, I want to appreciate just for a moment that you've brought up that a phrase isn't familiar to you, and allow me to define that for the group, because that's a shortcoming on my part. A penetration tester is a job role within cybersecurity whose tasks and duties are to determine if there's a vulnerability within a platform, software, network, etc.
I would say it depends on like her access, and if she's been given access to kind of check out this database.
Yeah, thank you, John. And Nicole brought up a similar point to you, that although Natalia is doing the right thing morally to ensure that she is compliant with company code and industry standard, she's testing on a live object. This company is using this database. And so there's nowhere in here that says she's gotten permission or that she's been authorized to actually conduct the test. She could possibly end up shutting down the whole database through her test, or cause an alert through somebody on her team that thinks it's a legitimate attack on the system. Because a penetration tester is effectively, in most scenarios, running a simulated attack. And so we don't want her to get in trouble. And so she would need to, receive that permission to do so. It comes back to the third component of ethical areas, the testing environment. Are you authorized to do that type of work? So that's a really good catch on John and Nicole's part. It's still technically no, but it does seem like yes, because she's morally doing the right thing. But ethically, she should be getting permission to do so first. In the second scenario, number B, we have a computer support agent like at a Best Buy or something. And so Jordan is supporting a person with the repair of their computer, but wants to ensure their data is protected. They're going to have to do some changes in the computer. In order to do that, they back up the data onto an external hard drive for safekeeping. After the service is complete, Jordan files the external hard drive away in case something happens to the computer at a later date. Is this ethical?
I think that has to do with permission again from the owner of the computer. Because obviously you don't know what's on that person's computer. As a computer repair person, I know you're not supposed to really be doing that. And if they might have pictures, music, whatever it is that's private to them, obviously you need their permission to do that. And you don't know what happens to an external drive. Someone can walk away with it. And if it's not secure with a password or anything like that, it's not encrypted. So that's a different situation.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing. And you and a few others in the chat are like, no, don't do that. Depending on the circumstance, it may be acceptable up until that last sentence to back it up and then restore it, but they shouldn't be keeping it, especially if the job is done. So it does come back to the whole, do you have permission? And also you don't know what that data is. It's a little different if it's a Best Buy or an internal employee, but only slightly so. John, is there something you wanted to also add?
No, I'm good with that. Thanks.
No problem. So with regards to ethical considerations, you can run scenarios like this with your students to see what would happen with each tool, but you can also address and consider yourself in a variety of activities to say, hey, where do we draw the line that is in this gray area of what is right and what is wrong? So it can be tricky. Now, this second part, we have a few additional things that we're going to address, which are called threats and threat actors. And so the first thing that we're going to define together is just what is a threat vector, which is just a path or a means by which a cyber criminal gets access to a computer, or data. How would, what entry points might a cyber criminal use to try and get access to data besides, just directly sitting at the computer? What else could they try?
hack your system?
They could. They can just call in. I saw a video. I showed the students of a video of this woman who demonstrated how she can just call up somebody's cell phone company and basically take over their whole account. And all she did was acted like she was a frantic mother she played sound of a baby in the background, and she just used that to her advantage. And people just kind of the biggest mistake that we saw that they did is that they was going to send her to reset the password to the phone, to the phone. And she said, "Oh God, no, I don't know what the password is or something. Can you please email it?" And they did. And so that's how she was able to get in contact. I mean, she was able to take over the person's account.
Yeah. And I love that video. I know exactly the one you're talking about. And to your point, and to add from the chat, Ben Roy calls this social engineering. It's an attempt at a very specific type known as phishing. You're trying to get information from somebody else to gain access. John also pointed out that you can listen to conversations or read written post-it notes. These are all different types of methods to really get access. And so when it comes to the way that you can get information, there's entry points and then there's vectors. So the entry points are, where do you go to try and get that information? In the examples that you all just provided, we're going directly to the user, or we're going to the support of the users. You can also try to attack over the network. You can go through email, a web application. You can even go through their phones. So there's a variety of different ways to try and get the data that we're attempting to get. With regards to social engineering, it could be as simple as a phone call. It could be like a text message where you're pretending to be somebody else, which would also be an example of spoofing. You're pretending you're somebody else to get information for illegitimate reasons. And so all of these are different ways that you can obtain those details. Programmatically, or like using software, there are also a few other ways that you can obtain this information through any of those entry points. It could be something like a virus or a worm. It could be something called a rootkit or a SQL injection. All of these things are different ways to attempt to gain that access to get that data. Are there any particular terms on here that we need to define together? So if
About
in the event,
DDoS?
thank you so much, Ben Roy. So DDoS specifically is defined as distributed denial of service. And that's when the attacker is trying to make a machine or a network resource unavailable to its normal users. And by disrupting that service, they can, create a level of hysteria or panic that could get people to give up their information. It could also give you time to get information from a resource because nobody else can access it. And so traditionally that's done by flooding the receptors, the receiver of the network interface card, and being like, don't take anybody's calls. It's just me and you, which is just one way of describing how a DDoS attack might work. All of these words, just as a side note, are also defined in the speaker notes in case you're just like, I know what it is, but I need a more formalized definition. Any other particular thing on here that may need a definition or be expanded upon? Okay. Now, my new question for all of you is, all right, so we have an idea of how people attack, but why do people attack? What is the benefit that they get from running one of these cyber criminal attacks?
Industrial espionage.
Okay, that's definitely one of them. Stacy?
I'm similar to what Nicole is saying. It's just they want to steal your identity to see if they can take over like some electronic banking and whatever they can get from you to get information.
Yeah.
Anything criminally related.
Yes.
Never in good faith.
And also thank you to Nicole for adding her additional language. So to your point, Stacy, and to everybody else's points, there's a bunch of reasons why. A threat actor is a specific person or entity responsible for a cybercrime. It's like the more technical term for hacker, because it's much more than just being a person. And so we have reasons like financial gain. We've got things like to give a message. And in some cases, like Stacy was saying, it's just to spread chaos. There are a few additional reasons, but like to summarize them into just 3 buckets, like there's one way of doing it. In terms of those threat actors, though, and this goes to John's point, there are different types of groups or people that do these types of attacks. So in John's example, he mentioned espionage. Usually those are government sponsored. If North Korea wants to do something to Russia, it falls underneath that type of threat actor situation. If there is a person who's just doing it on their own, they're bored, they have nothing they want to do, they're an individual. Some people call them a lone wolf. I don't. But that was one of the language vocab words given to me. And then there's these other few. The one that needs the most explanation, though, on here, it might be the script keys. And that is what your students can accidentally become. And that is because they don't know how to do any of the programming. They may not have a lot of experience, but they have the tools. And so they can try it. And usually those people are the ones that mostly get caught. The other ones have a lot more experience. And in some situations, they're federally backed by their country or state. So it's super easy to get convoluted. But when you're working on like a report or something, you can commonly find these names, these actors in the reports to figure out like who did they identify did the thing. Now, there's one more type of threat actor, and that is referred to as an internal user error. It technically is a type of threat because, somebody did something to your network and data. It was an accident, they made a mistake, but it could still be destructive. And so although we're not going to list it here on the screen, there will be times you come across reports or things like that where it's like, nobody hacked us. This company employee made a mistake. And that's why all of the passwords got leaked. It's not something that is commonly done, but it is different from the insider threat actor, which is more about like somebody's upset with how they've been treated at work. And so they decide to be retaliatory and expose the company's secrets or something like that. Again, you can stop me at any time. How does this tie into the curriculum? Well, there's a few lessons on these different roles, but most importantly, cybersecurity, as you've probably heard, and for those of you that are already in the IT space, know that things are changing all the time. We can't switch it up and stay static and just keep the way things that are. So we have to keep updated. And one of the things that even professionals in the industry are asked to do are to conduct cyber threat intelligence reports. It can be on something that has happened as an incident within their own business organization, but it can also be a learning activity, which students will do in the curriculum as a way to investigate other events to determine who was the threat actor, what was the threat vector, what were they trying to gain out of it. And, we can figure out from there, the who, what, when, where, and how. We don't always ascertain the why, and so it's not a required component of those reports. But the best part about it is as students develop their skills and they can identify what went wrong, the next phase of it is, well, what would you have done to prevent it? Or what would you have done to react to it as it has happened? And this is what takes it from just being a lesson about like, oh, here's a problem, to now you need to bring all your knowledge and your skills together to give it a best shot. Any particular questions in relation to threats, threat actors, or motivation to commit a cybercrime?
I posted in the chat. Funny enough, found some quiet time this weekend. I actually watched the Snowden documentary on Netflix, which kind of didn't go into like a lone wolf scenario, but in this case, what was done was more to shed light on something. And I think in some cases you have the black hats, you have the white hats, but you also have the gray hats in some cases where they're not necessarily doing something to be malicious, but it's to point attention to something.
Yeah. And first off, thanks for the resource in the chat. And I actually want to expand upon that, because if you are a person that is being paid legitimately by the government or a business to do these types of actions in a permissible way, like, you're still a hacker. You're still essentially a person that has the same skills. It's just about intention. And that's where this component of the training intersects with the ethics component. So it's a really great point. We're going to get interactive soon, so I hope you're all ready. This next part is one of the bigger parts, and so I've actually broken down domain 3 into segments. This is a little bit more of the theoretical knowledge you need to be able to walk through the conversations related to cybersecurity. They pop up a lot in reports. They also are things that you're going to have to explain to students either through visual, video, audio, so that way they can translate the concepts onto, like technical processes. And so we'll start with like, what are these things in general? And then we'll take the next step and be like, but what are they actually? So the first thing is known as the AAA or AAA, which is a security mechanism that's based on how do we interface with credentialing and authorization. And so there's 3 sections. Each one of them is represented by an A. And the first one is authentication. It's, are you the person that you say you are? And in the authentication area, there's the 3 W's. Similarly to the Department of Education, cybersecurity loves acronyms. So you have what you know, what you have, and who you are. And these are different ways that you can authenticate yourself. What are some examples of these different types of authentications?
Don't they usually ask for like a current make and model of your vehicle, I think? Or is that more of authorization?
That could be something that might be like what you have.
Okay.
And that's fine. I'm not sure what is exactly asking for that information, but maybe you're doing like a auto website login or something.
Mhm.
Benroy pointed out username, passcode, pattern, PIN. These are all things you know, so what you know. Are there any authentication methods that come to mind with who you are?
And sometimes they ask you for like an additional email or an alternate email. Sometimes if you're doing like a, what's it called, like a two-way authentication. Sorry, it's Monday.
No, it's okay. You're referring to 2-step authentication. Usually it's like an email and then like a text message.
Right.
Benroy brings up finger swipe, so fingerprints, eye scans. Those fall underneath biometrics. It's an authentication method using biological composition. That's who you are.
Yeah.
And so who
Right.
you are, what you know, and what you have are 3 different ways to authenticate. John, you want to add something?
Just like fingerprints, you can have retina
Yeah.
scan or the kind of biological readouts.
100%. And so when it comes to, being more secure, but also finding a way to balance like what's convenient for users and what's most protected, a lot of organizations recommend multi-factor authentication, meaning that in order to log in, you have to do 2 of the 3. It doesn't always mean that you're going to do 2 different categories, but more often than not, that's how it works. And so, for example, in Stacy's scenario, what is me putting in the password to Google, but I need to have my phone with me in order to type in the code that gets sent there. I don't need to know anything about the phone, especially if there's no lock on it, or I can see the message come up even when it's locked. But if I don't have that phone with me, I can't log in. Multi-factor authentication, sometimes known as two-step authentication, is just a way to bring up that level of security. Authorization, okay, which is the second A, is are you or have you been given permission or the appropriate access level, which we'll talk about on the next slide, to actually get that resource. So many of you have access to a system called CSIS, which is the Special Education Student Information System for the Department of Ed. All of you can log in if you're teachers, but you're not authorized to access every single student record that has an IEP, an individualized education program. So based on your permission, you can only see what the administrator or the supervisor above you has dictated that you've been authorized to look at. The last step is accounting, and this is the one that often gets forgotten, but it's a proactive as well as a reactive measure. If I can check the records and see when you logged in, what did you do, how often did you do it, I'm able to ascertain a better image of what is going on. Without any type of accounting records, sometimes called logs, we won't know what is going on except through like anecdotal evidence or, like if you're recording what's happening on screen. So these very lengthy, simplistic, looking text files actually contain a lot of information that provide us with good details. An example of this might be when I worked at my previous school, I was talking to our 9th grade entrepreneurship teacher, and she called me over and she was like, I think we have a problem. And I was like, oh no, what is it? And looking on the computer, I could see that the message was an email to her that essentially was giving her a bunch of slanderous language. They were calling her derogatory names. And she goes, this isn't like my student. This doesn't make any sense. Is there a way for us to figure it out who actually sent it? Or if the kid actually just did send the very rude email? By looking at our Google Suite records, we were able to determine based on login time and IP address that the person that sent it was at the school, but that student was absent for the day. So we were able to ascertain, through a lot of more deductive reasoning steps, that the message was from the student that had sat in the other student's seat because they forgot to log out. And we were able to then reach a conclusion. But we would never have been able to do that without the automated logs that Google keeps. And in some situations, as a cybersecurity professional, you have to set up and schedule. It was actually a lot of fun to do that, but also very sad.
I think a similar principle is when the machine asks you if you're a robot. If they ask you if you're a robot, they look at your history of browsing.
Yeah, they'll use like your inputs and things like that. That's more of a test to prevent bots or programs that are scheduled to do the same task that it's commanded to do over and over. But it does follow a similar principle of like, do you have access? Are you authorized to do this? Are you trying to do the same thing over and over and over for no reason? That's a good point. We're going to couple this AAA component now in the authorization section now with different types of access controls. And so access controls, there are 3 of them. For those of us that teach computer repair or system support, if you're fancy and that's what you call it, you may have heard of MAC addresses. There's also a MAC for control models, which is mandatory access control. Then there's DAC and RAC, which are the 2 corresponding ones on the screen. I'm not going to read these to you because that would defeat the purpose of like actually having a live person explain them. But with mandatory access control, you're thinking about assigning like clearance levels. Like in the government, you know, the president has top secret clearance level. They have the ability to look at any information from the top of the crop all the way down. But then you might have a secret level, which is below top secret. You can't, as a secret level agent, you can't look at anything that's top secret, but you can check out things on your level and below. These mandatory access control setups enable you to set up labels that are hierarchical, meaning that there's like a level 1, 2, 3, and 4, etc. You could go on forever if you wanted to. And really ascertain like, well, this object, this document is a level 3. This document is a level 2. When thinking about an access control model, that seems to work a lot in governmental situations, but it wouldn't work for something like a school because varying people, there aren't levels in a school in the same way that there is a hierarchy of top secret, secret, confidential. There are teachers who are doing many things beyond teaching in a classroom. Like if you're a work-based learning coordinator, you have access to social security numbers. That's to me, that's a top secret level set of information. But if we were giving only all teachers secret level access, the system isn't going to be flexible enough to say like, no, this teacher's special. Which is why we might want to then move over to DAC, or discretionary access control. This is more like Google Docs, or, you know, like if you've ever done like the file management lab where you have students like edit the permissions on like a folder or a document, and you can say like, by user, by specific group, you can have access to this document to read it, to write on it, to modify it or delete it. This is much more common for individuals or for schools because there's a lot more freedom in this type of access control method. The downside, of course, is because it's all driven on the owner, whoever created the document, there's no larger scheme of like, well, who's in charge? The last option, and this one allows you to be a little bit more flexible between them, is the RAC, the role-based access control. And this is where you assign users to different role types. So for example, I could assign all of the people in here, you know, to a group called Cyber Ops cohort, and, you know, give you special permissions just to that whole group. If you're familiar with like Windows Server, you're able to do this, you know, by putting them into different groups. You're able to provide access to certain like network drives and things like that. But you're not limited to putting people in only one group. So I could have one teacher be in the teachers group, but they can also be in the work-based learning coordinator group so that they're allowed to access that type of system where, you know, they can see those social security numbers. This is a lot more flexible than the first one, and it's more centralized than the last one and the middle one. And so businesses and schools, especially with how Central works in the Department of Education, they try to really go for this type of model of like, who's allowed to access this type of data. But for those of you that, you know the truth, those managers that are not connected, or they're not aware, or they're not like involved, you know, they don't always know what's best for the roles. And so it takes a lot more of like involved management to do well. So there's a few recommendations that come with access management. The first one is, you know, it may seem obvious, but don't give users too much control. They should just have what they need to succeed. And this is usually called the principle of least privilege. The CEO does not need access to your firewalls. I'm sorry if your CEO thinks so, but they don't. One might think that if you're at the top of your game, if you're the top position, you should have access to everything. But if you don't segment out like who's responsible for what and who should change what, you're creating much more openings on what they call your attack surface, which is just how many people can manipulate the same thing and make it vulnerable. To create problems. In the same way that if you've ever spoken to somebody at DIIT or you've ever worked in like industry, maybe like in a hospital, some people go as far as you have a regular account. And then if you're like an IT administrator, you have a whole separate account just dedicated to administrative privileges. So that way you can monitor the two actions separately. So it really depends on your management style. No one here is expected to manage any of like the system networks or things like that, but you've been often asked to support or handle some of those issues. And so you could see that based on their preferred access management technique, it's not always suitable for the end user. That builds on the fact that like we need auditing, we need that accounting piece, and we need structure, which is what the last two components are really trying to drive towards. Just going to briefly stop there. Any big questions, any concerns?
Pastor Dre, I just wanted to ask, I don't know if most schools still have them, but I'm on a shared campus and you're a little young, but I don't know if some schools still have like a manager for the network in the building. And, they used to hire people to actually have that role, and I don't see that role present in a lot of schools now. Is that because of maybe some data breaches or something that occurred, do you think?
So that's a really good point, Stacy. And so every school has a person assigned duties to support tech issues, but they don't have any management rights. So that's the SPOC program, the single point of contact that DIT was like, this will empower the schools and this will give us only one person we need to talk to. But unfortunately, due to like misappropriation of credentials and monitoring, the DOE has been reluctant to share any of those types of responsibilities with school-based personnel. And it's towing that line of like what's convenient to schools to what is most secure. And so like they have federal, state, and local mandates to abide by. And sometimes employees in schools aren't trained on those things. But there are certain circumstances where you can get access, and DIIT is trying with their like the Intune platform from Microsoft, as well as a few other softwares where they're trying to bring more power into the schools. I mean, we can definitely talk about that a little later on.
All right, thank you. Because, you're thinking about the permissions and what you have permission to do and not, and I'm sure that we all have violated those permissions at some point in our career. So just trying to stay out of jail. Thanks.
No, I'm with you. I've gotten calls from DIIT before and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, wow, you guys are fast. Surprising. I know, right? Not always though. Into our next section, we're going to briefly talk about cryptography. Cryptography is the practice and study of writing and solving codes. This gets extended into the land of computer technology in the world of encryption. So we use essentially very complex mathematical codes to create encryption. And so let's define some vocabulary words. See, I didn't fall short this time. So some vocabulary to get involved with cryptography is the first thing is called the cipher. You might also hear this referred to as the encryption method in computer technology. And this is the algorithm. This is the mathematical computation that enables us to change what is plain and very easily digestible by us to indecipherable computer language that without the proper information and keys to decrypt it, you have no idea what it says. And that is where we differentiate in terms of like what state or what phase your data is in. If it's not encrypted, we call this plain text. And that's where the human can read it, they got it, they understand it. But ciphertext, which which all of this comes from like text documents. It's like starting at the simplest level, but can apply to like images, videos, etc. Is when it's encrypted. So ciphertext is like when you try to open something you're not allowed to, and you don't have the correct authentication. And so it just gives you a bunch of jumble, or it says, no, no, nice try. That's not happening. Cryptography is all about protecting the data from people that aren't supposed to see it, but also making sure that the data is not only exactly what it says it's supposed to be, but the fact that it doesn't get changed just on the fly. And so cryptography is a very big area of cybersecurity. We could honestly have spent 90 minutes just talking about it. But to get down the basics, we'll look at just 3 specific cryptographic methods for protecting data. The first 2 are known as symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption is when you have 2 people, right? And they want to send a secret message between one another. So they agree on this one key, this one algorithm that they are both going to use to encrypt and decrypt their message. So in person A, they're going to make their message. They're going to use that secret key or that algorithm to transform it into ciphertext, something that a normal person can't read. And they are going to send it off to the other person. That other person is then going to use the same key, okay, that matched the key from person A to decrypt it. It's going to reverse the process and make that ciphertext back into plain text. And this is what's going to allow us to say, oh, that's your message. Oh, that is what you intended to send me, and no, it hasn't been changed. The positives of symmetric encryption is that there's one key instead of multiple ones. But the downside is that if you add a third person now, you now create a new problem where everybody's going to need new sets of keys. Person A needs a set of keys with person B, but person A also needs a set with person C. They're different keys because they come in pairs. Once you start sharing out your key too much, if it's the same key, you run the risk of, oh, well, now everybody's gotten it. And so they're just going to decrypt any message that I sent. And that can come in the form of like a man-in-the-middle attack, which is also known as session hijacking, where like person A is sending a message to person B, but person C, unbeknownstly, has gotten a copy of that key and plucked, which you would find out in the packet sniffing activity that Amaris is doing, and decrypting that ciphertext to find out the message. To circumvent this, to prevent it from being a major issue, somebody came up with asymmetric encryption. This is where everybody has 2 keys. That's it. You have 2 keys. I have 2 keys. The whole world, each computer has 2 keys. They have one key they keep to themselves. This is known as your private key, or in the graphics description, your secret key. And this is solely used for decryption. I don't share this key with anybody. It's only when messages are sent to me do I use my decryption secret private key. In order for somebody else, though, to send me a secret message that's only from moi, they are going to use my public key. So and I'm just going to use Stacy as an example, if Stacy's going to send me a message using our secret little method, she's going to ask me for my public key, and I'm going to say, here you go, Stacy. And she's going to say, all right, I'm going to take this message and use your public key to make it into ciphertext. If I send that document as Stacy to anybody else, they can't decrypt it because you need my private key. I'm the one who's got the matching key to that. Once I get the message, I use my secret key and I can see what the message is. If I want to send a message back to Stacy, in the symmetric encryption situation, I would just use the same key that she did. But in this asymmetric side, I now have to use Stacy's public key, because when I want to send somebody a message, I got to use their public key. So that way, when she gets it, Stacy uses Stacy's private key to decrypt her message. And so up front, it may seem a little confusing, but the primary difference between the two is in symmetric encryption. There's one key that both people use, and it's only between those 2 people. With asymmetric key, each person has 2 of those keys, One of them they share for everybody else to send them messages, and then the other key, which is used for them to decrypt messages sent to them. Any big questions?
Is the asymmetric encryption, is that something that WhatsApp uses?
You know, personally, I'm not exactly sure, but if I'm taking a logical guess here, it may be symmetric because I believe that you can't, even if you were to get into one person's chat box for one conversation, you wouldn't be able to use that key for somebody else's conversation. But I would have to check. It's a good question.
Okay.
The other half of things is hashing. Hashing is that complex math, but what it does is it takes any data. It could be as simple as one character or a 4K video, and it translates that set of data into a set size value. In the example that I'm going to give you, which uses the MD5, which is just the name of the complicated hashing algorithm, it makes things 25 characters long. If you do the math and you do, there's 26 capital letters, there's 26 lowercase letters, and then there's 10 digits, and I have 25 slots, I almost have a near infinite possibility of values that I can get. And so it's very rare, if at all possible, for two hashes to ever match. So it's a very good way to say, like, if I'm sending you a text document with the hash value and it matches when I open it and check to make sure that, it's the hash value that I want, I know they're the exact same document. So what does that look like in an example? In this first example, let's say I'm putting in just the word hello, capital H, lowercase LO. When I throw it through the MD5 hashing tool, which, by the way, I'm gonna drop this in the chat, and also it's in the slides. I get this 8B1 blah 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 blah. If I am going to try that again, but this time I'm going to change the capital H to just a lowercase, notice how drastically different it is. So I can use a hash to determine the integrity or the authenticity that something has remained in its original state to when it was sent to me. You literally could add one space to a 10,000 word document and it will change the whole hash. Notice that if I put hello back into the MD5 generator, which you can definitely do using the link in the chat, I will get the same value every single time. We could spend a lot more time looking at a bunch of things that break down like how passwords work, which is very steeply built into hashing. But for the purposes of the fundamentals, we are going to end domain 3 here. But when it comes to things like Amaris and Chris's session, there's more details about like how to use tools to essentially brute force or try and attempt to hack a password. And that will reiterate these points about hashing. Okay, any big questions? Cool. You guys are great. This next section is all about email. And so we've already defined phishing earlier in today's session, but just as a reminder, we've put a definition up for you. And then also spam. Spam is a thing. It may seem that it is innocent, although garbage, but within it, it can be a infected and riddled, diseased message that you just don't want. We're now gonna do a brief exercise. On your screen is an image of an email that I received the other day. Is this email an example of phishing or is it legit?
I would say, I don't know. I would think it's phishing because it says dear network user.
That's definitely a key identifier. Thank you, Stacy. Any other thoughts from the crowd?
I'd say it may or may not be, depending on where that link takes you to, because the
Mm,
link may take you to another website that asks you for one of those AAA pieces that allow you to authenticate and reset your password. Um, One way that I would instruct students to determine if it may or may not be phishing is to look at the sender. Um, if you could, in some case, probably copy the header information out and look at the sender information, you can see if it's a legitimate email address or not. Um, but
yeah,
also right click on that link and copy that link into a notepad and see if it's also sending you to a legitimate uh, URL from the university itself. If it goes I look at the first piece. If it even says email me at blah blah and it's so long, then I disregard the message.
yeah, and those are all really good points. So, you can also take it in a contextual circumstance. I don't teach at my university. I'm a Department of Education employee, so that would immediately throw it out the window
Mhm.
for me. But the points that Ben Roy and Stacy have made are very clear as aspects of like, how do you know if this is phishing or not? And so investigation is kind of required. And so there are a few tools, and this scenario actually exists within the lesson for students about phishing and email security. And we're actually going to just briefly look at 3 tools. Those tools also call back to what Ben Roy was talking about, which is the message header. We can go into the analytics of the message in its raw form and analyze that. We can also take links or files that we consider suspicious and upload them to a website called VirusTotal. And that will actually tell us if it's ever been identified in the security community as something that is considered malware or bad software. And then, of course, there's a centralops.net tool, which is specifically catered around the fact that we can determine whether an address is actually even valid or not. And so, just taking a brief moment to look at these things, we can take a step out, right? And what I would do is on this message, I would click this little down arrow. It's a little bit more updated if you have a different version of Gmail, but I would click show original and I would get a very scary amount of information, which I would copy and paste into message header, which is that first link. I'll go ahead and open that for us. This is a Google tool. They recommend you use it. There is a help guide for you that breaks down like how do you get the email header, which is through that one-step process that I just shared, but also how to interpret what you're getting out of it. And so by copy pasting that in here, it will actually do an analysis for you. There are a few things for you to look at. You can look to see, well, does it come from somebody authentic? I thought this email was coming from my university. Why is it telling me it's coming from the White House? I don't think that's real. In addition, you'll notice that there are a few of these terms up here. All of them have to do with email security. And we could define those for you, but they're also in the notes. And essentially, it's saying that it passed none of these checks. So that would be a very big sign to me, like, I don't trust it. It's just not happening for me. To Ben Roy's point about that link, I'm going to copy paste that link from the email and go to VirusTotal and see how that works out. These are simple tools that you and your students can use. And when I do a search for that, I can see that the link specifically, because this is a practice situation, so of course I'm not going to give you a bad one, but you can see that on all of these websites, which are confirmed, substantially noticeable security communities, that they consider them clean. They're good to go. There are a few that don't have the data for this, but that doesn't mean every single one of them is going to mark it as clean or not. So it's just another tool for you to say like, hey, by any chance, is this a problem? Lastly, coming back to another one of Ben Roy's statements is just the fact of like, what is the actual email it's sending you to? And so if I put it into CyberOps, it should tell me like, hey, this email is real, like it's good. But if I send it to Go and it tells me that it's a bad address, that means it's not real. So where's it really coming from? Where's the truth in it all? And you actually could spend time going a little bit deeper to figure out like where the message came from in that raw header data. But just for a fact of a very quick check of like, is the email it says it come from even real? You can quickly check using tools like Email Dossier to say like, what is it valid? Is it true? So all of these different things are free to use, and for students in your class to be like, I can do some technological things that support checking the validity of emails being sent to me.
Hey, Damiana, I also want to point out on Virus Total,
Uh-huh.
you saw ESET there.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone has ever purchased anything computer related from Micro Center, that is their recommended antivirus, anti-malware software suite that's used.
Cool. I did not know that. I love Micro Center, but I didn't know they had a recommended provider.
It used to be Kaspersky until the whole Russia situation happened and they were caught selling information. Now it's ESET.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no worries.
The last part of this section, and then we'll dovetail it into section 5, which is the final portion of today's training. And then, of course, if there's additional questions or supports, we're here for you, is data protections. And so there are a bunch of different legislative acts and protocols and procedures out there that are all geared towards protecting data in a variety of ways. If you've ever seen this first one, though, ISO IEC 2701, that is not particularly a data protection legislator, but it's more of a managerial system for saying, like, this is how you need to manage data. This is how, these are the best practices. And it's an internationally recognized standard. The Department of Defense follows it. It's part of things like the Security Plus and CISA Plus from CompTIA certification exams. It shows up in the EC Council. So it's very, very widely accepted. I don't think anybody worth their weight in salt would say that it's useless, because it's so ingrained in the practice of cybersecurity professionals. But you may find that based on your locale or the context that you're in, there are other acts that really impact the way that you can protect and authorize the ability to work with data. You've got things that are in the United States. The European Union has their own. For those of you that are familiar with healthcare, they have HIPAA, which I incorrectly spelled on here, even though I read it to myself as I wrote it. And that has to do with healthcare information that you need to protect, that healthcare providers need to protect, that they're not allowed to share your information, that even written within HIPAA legislature says the minimum level of protection that your data needs to be held at. You might even, as educators, be familiar with things like FERPA or COPA, which have to do with protections of student and family data. And so all of those things have different levels of protections that involve the data involved for cybersecurity professionals to adhere to. If you go on like certain websites, like the Zoom website, Google Meet, you can see that they detail, if you're looking for the people that need it, what levels, what legislatures do their systems abide by, so that way you can feel rest assured that it's a valid solution. In fact, we're currently investigating a solution for the whole Department of Education. And the first question out of DIIT's mouth was, is it FERPA and COPA compliant? And we're like, yes. And here's the documentation to support it. because those are, for them, those are the basic things they need to check off. Our last section is about network security. And so for network security, if you're going to teach this curriculum either as standalone or just by unit, I highly recommend, with the way that Chris has written it, that you preface or, in the prior course, ensure that students know about network hardware and the remaining listings of items on this slide, because they're not explicitly detailed within the curriculum. They're more of review items written out as lessons. And so if you want to make sure that students can grapple with these concepts at a level for security, they need mastery on them individually. What's a hub? What does it do? How does it work? What's the OSI model? How does it get involved with networking before they make the step to security? So this is kind of just like a forewarning for you. If you aren't currently covering this, you're going to want to integrate that as either as part of the lessons, or you're going to want to just ramp it up a little bit, so that way your previous course or unit has this content in it. Though I would say that a majority of IT related programs already cover this stuff. With network security, before we get into that level of depth, the first thing to do is recognize that we're trying to protect something. And so one of the theological frameworks for this is called defense in depth. At the core, we want to protect our data. And around it, there are layers of, the security process to how is that protected. If, let's say, we're doing healthcare information, data from a dentist might involve like teeth charting information. It might involve like prescriptions. That's all housed within an application, specifically Open Dental. That just comes from experience in one particular office that's not international standard. But then from that level of security, we now have the host, which is the computer the data resides on. Is that secured? You have the settings, locked down. Then you move on to the network, which in this graphic is broken down between what's on your network and the access to the internet. And then you have physical guards, like things like door locks, literal people that are guarding your building, as well as things like, just putting down like locks on your door, key cards, things like that. And then of course, like policies and procedures, like changing your password frequently, not leaving your desk unattended. So in terms of defense in depth, you can go really in depth by just breaking down these various levels. I mean, they are approached at different points in the curriculum, but for the focus of this training, we're going to just internalize on that networking component. But a further breakdown of all of those points are provided in the speaker notes for this training. When it comes to network defense in depth, they have their own like sub figure that breaks it down. There are things like an advanced threat protection system. This is like the Cisco BlueNet platform, which prevents against like super advanced like attacks, like at a large scale for enterprise. There are devices, both hardware and software, that are designed to detect or prevent intrusion of illicit things. And it could literally be the device that separates the internet from your router, and it like scans things as it comes through. But it could also be something that just monitors your network traffic and says, whoa, 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 hey, this is some bad stuff over here. I need to alert you because this is on the network and you guys need to take it off, quarantine, do something. We just talked a little bit about email security, but there's also like website security that's involved, because if you're a big business, you're hosting your own web servers. So you have that server on your network. You're letting people access that web server from the internet, but you need to keep it away from the rest of your data. You also want to protect your network if you do get attacked. So data loss prevention, like what types of remediation tools and recovery tools are you using to back up your data, protect it in case it gets attacked? What are you doing to make sure that even if a person does somehow get a chunk of it, it becomes very difficult for them to get anything out of the information they take? And this is like where you face the encryption area and things like that. Then you got firewalls. You could spend a whole unit on firewalls, how they work, what's going on, how to configure them. There's actually a few lessons that break down the components that go into like firewall rules and like how to configure a firewall. It doesn't get to the level of mastery because there are many layers to firewall configuration, but it definitely gets you to the starting point of being aware of what they do and how they function. And then the last one is more of a tool. It's not a active system that will protect your network, but it gives you information in real time. So all of the things mentioned above it can all feed into this SEIM that basically gives you a one-stop shop in an application to say like, what's going on my network? That way you don't have to check a whole bunch of different applications. You don't have to log into a whole bunch of different devices. You can just see what's going on. Some of these network tools are actually going to be used in this course. The four major ones involved are Nmap, which allows you to analyze protocols on a network. Wireshark, which is a network sniffer, as well as a network monitoring tool. I realize that the graphics are switched, so I will fix that. But that is also a tool that was discussed in Amaris's session. There's Metasploit, which Chris is going over in his session, which is a lot more professionally recognized in terms of like being a tool to test vulnerabilities and help with penetration testing. And then there's something called DVWA. This is a tool, but not in the same way the first three are. The first three are used to like identify problems, collect data, make actionable steps. The DVWA is actually a system, a platform that is purposely vulnerable that you can freely and legally test on, so that way you can determine where you are in terms of your skills and try things out. In the curriculum, there is a whole bunch of exercises involved with these four tools, and many of them have guides that are written by professionals as well as built into the platform to just help students figure out how to use these tools on a platform where things aren't so secure, things are not doing so well. Like I mentioned earlier, these softwares are all free to use, they're accessible to you, and as of last check, they all work on the DOE network, at least within 2 schools. If you have a problem with your network, you can definitely speak to DIIT or me, and we can work through the process of how to get those things unblocked. It's not too taxing, I promise. Coming around the bend here, last thing is, I just wanted to highlight those networking activities, just so that way you could see a direct connection between the content just shared and like what students will actually do. And so with Nmap, they're going to scan ports and determine like, are they open? Are they closed? Should they be open or closed? Because ports are different avenues into a network, into a computer. And not all of them have to be open, especially if your computer isn't providing that service. We're going to do packet analysis with Wireshark. You can actually pull out packets with passwords in them. And if you have the right tools, you can break it down and get it from them. You can use Metasploit to emulate, actually do a brute force attack and a command injection. A command injection is when you provide programmatic language into a system, whether it's a website or an application, like into a form field. And when the computer tries to digest and interpret that information, it says, well, I was expecting just your name, but you're giving me some code to execute, and I don't have a problem with doing that, which most applications should be programmed to immediately stop and cancel. But some systems are built poorly. And so I'm going to execute this. And that might reveal passwords. It may allow them to log in no matter what, no matter what it says. And one of the big notorious ones where that's a key example was with the PlayStation Network. That's actually how somebody got in. They went to the login, they write a whole script into the username section, and they were able actually to log in as an administrator because the login platform, the website, wasn't built correctly. Each of these things are defined in the speaker notes again, but with the last few minutes, if there are any questions, any concerns, would love to hear them. Other than that, as a reminder, this was recorded, as well as the slides will be available to you immediately.
Damiano, thank you so much again for sharing your knowledge and being so patient for me, with breaking it down in simple ABC forms. But just want to know, do you have any suggested like supporting materials to use? Let's say just so, like again, I don't have a cybersecurity background, but if I wanted to get like a book or a text or something, I guess the websites you gave, but something that will help give me a little more knowledge into it. Do you recommend anything or just the sites that you already referred to?
I do have a bunch of recommendations. The first one, and I know it's going to sound ridiculous, but the first one is us. Okay. The whole point of creating community is so that way we can rely on each other. Because as much as I'd like to think I know a lot of things, I still feel very small in the cyber world. And, if I feel small, like imagine how the next person is. So like I asked Chris a whole bunch of questions. You can ask me anything you want. In terms of like resource materials, the EC Council is a really great one. They were built after 9/11 to provide, cybersecurity awareness and training. They have a bunch of certifications that our students can earn. CompTIA and their cybersecurity pathway, they have textbooks, they have a documentation to build upon. If you want to go a little bit more like what can I use, but what can students also get a hand on at the same time? Certiport through their LearnKey platform that they're partnered with for the Microsoft Technology Associates exams. They have a security fundamentals certification. They have a bunch of training videos, texts. They even have a free textbook available online that I can point you to that could be really helpful. And then the last thing for me, and I know it's not a big one on anybody's list here, but it's still something you could take advantage of if you wanted to, would be additional coursework. I'm not saying you have to go do a whole nother master's, but if you're looking to get a plus 30 and you don't have it already, I went to PACE. That might help. A bunch of colleges like City Tech, they're all trying to get on this cybersecurity situation. I'm happy to offer additional classes. And maybe we can find out if we can replicate the school technology summit, but instead of it being about educational technology, it could be more about like showcasing knowledge in a way that it's very similar to this, but hosted by educators for educators on our content topics. So that would be my short list. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course, Stacy. Any other big questions, concerns, asks, needs? I finished right on time. Jessica, I did it.
You did. Woohoo! Well done. Okay, so we are going to do a quick announcement soon, but it looks like we've got maybe around 10-ish more people that need to rejoin. So if everybody wants to take a 2-minute break, feel free to, and we'll reconvene in just a few moments.
Okay, I did put the link in the chat box, but we'll also link it onto the slides for today and the follow-up email.
Hello, folks.
Hey there.
Everybody said we're just waiting for everybody to come back in.
Great.
Group, I got to be honest. I can't wait to watch the other sessions. And I'm not just saying that. Like, I really, truly can't wait to watch them. I'm very excited to watch Amaris's because I think that's like my level. But I'll watch Chris's and I'll probably cry through the whole process, being like, I don't get it.
No, it was terrific. It was terrific. Even I learned quite a few things, and you all know my level.
All right, so we have around 12 minutes left or so, looks like it. And I am super excited to welcome Olin to the group. Reza, do you want to pull up the PowerPoint slide just really quickly? Because they had some key details there that we wanted to share. So it looks like Olin is on camera now. Welcome, Olin.
Hey, thanks so much.
Hey,
how are you, Jessica? Hey, good to see everybody.
So we have one thing that we're really interested in doing moving forward, obviously, is reconvening this group of awesome educators here, but also just to stay in touch with you about opportunities that are coming up. And so we have one that's, Olin and I have been in communication for, gosh, maybe a few months now about the work that he's doing. And Olin, why don't you take it away from here and share out with what.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And great to see you, Jessica. And nice to be connected with everybody. I hope you're all staying safe out on the East Coast. I appreciate the introduction. I've been working with Jessica for a few months now, and we had an opportunity to bring some of your students into our cybersecurity virtual externship, which we launched this summer. We are Experience Externships, and I'm one of the co-founders. And we're coming out of 8 years of developing industry-based exposure and programs which help students discover an industry and the realities of it before they make those important decisions on pathways and also which career to choose that speaks to who they are. We've been building programs, for example, where their students are doing video game development workshops with the Xbox team here in Seattle, building real video games, presenting their work, engineering programs with Boeing. So we could see the value of helping students get a mini work experience earlier to discover these careers. This really culminated for us in cybersecurity when we launched all of our programs virtually since the pandemic. I reached out to Jessica, we got connected, and she was kind enough to help find some students to join a scholarship program that we had this summer for this new externship model, which we took virtually. Since that point, it's really taken off, not just from a contemporary aspect, of course, the pandemic, but in general, having opportunities to discover from home has really increased the accessibility of this model, as well as lowered the costs so that more people can really dive in and get this experience. We were recently asked to present about this cybersecurity externship for the National Cybersecurity Career Awareness Week, which was last week, on behalf of the National Initiative for Cyber Education. This is obviously stemming from, as we all know, a huge workforce gap and talent gap in cybersecurity, 3.5 million unfilled jobs, 0% unemployment, and a huge growing cyber concern for our nation and for our families. What we did is we built this program to have 3 elements to help students discover, is cybersecurity for me, in a way that's fun and engaging. A lot of our partners had expressed the challenge of parents not understanding what cybersecurity is and students thinking that cybersecurity was a very lonely existence, very little teamwork, and something very technical, which really couldn't be further from the truth depending on the different types of careers that might speak to their personalities or to their talents. So part of this is discovering the career. Part of this is creating this in an engaging way, which attracts students to the pathway. So where a lot of our CTE teams have expressed how they're now seeing an increase in people choosing the pathway now that it has opened their eyes to the cybersecurity world, as well as to the realities of this type of experience. We weave in all of our programs, so it starts with an interactive workshop focusing on a major cyber threat. So 4 major cyber threats we focus on are protecting private companies. So what happens when our company's most sensitive data is stolen, released on the dark web, And they're hearing from people from Cisco, Accenture, Facebook, and then going through real gamified challenges, simulating what that person or that industry presenter would experience in the field. So they have a really deep understanding of going through that with industry. There's networking and deep insight that they're getting out of the experience. We then focus on keeping our nation safe. We bring in people from the FBI, from the NSA, talking about their roles in elite investigative units, keeping our family safe, keeping our nation safe, and then going through a similar gamified challenge in small teams. Our third threat is protecting critical infrastructure. So 16 types of critical infrastructure. What jobs are related to keeping our energy system safe, our electrical grids, water, all of the different aspects that keep our nation humming. And then finally, keeping our family safe and how to protect your family. So they get to have those different aspects with industry. We keep it really fun, really fresh. And this is all built by people from industry so that there's a real mini work experience. We're giving out digital badges for students who earn it, opportunities to earn recommendation letters. And this is a great talking point to add to a resume or in a job interview or applying for internships or higher education. So there's a whole aspect about building globally competitive citizens through the program. And it hits all of our PBL, project-based learning, and preparing students for the 21st century digital workplace and what we can all expect in the new normal. I'd love to chat if you guys are interested in joining the program. We've built this locally for some of our partners who want to bring in local industry to then connect with the program itself. So we're doing that in different states. We had a very high audit from a federal auditor who audited one of our grants for this program. 87% of our students said this made them want to choose the pathway. 97% had a high level of satisfaction. And this also helped prepare them at a high rate. 87% said this prepared them for the future, regardless of whether it was cybersecurity. We have open enrollment programs, which I see Jessica's got listed here. Thank you. February 15th through the 19th and March 29th through April 2nd for your winter break and your spring breaks. I always love to hear what's going on in the Big Apple and hearing some of what you guys are building and if there's a crossover. So I'd be more than happy to connect, and I'll go ahead and post my information in the chat. Thank you all so much for your time and wishing you all a safe and happy end to 2020.
Thanks so much, Olin. Of course, folks are interested in the costs of this. You want to you want to break that down a little bit more for us?
Absolutely. So depending on the program, for example, when we sit down with an organization or a school district, we start by understanding what are their goals for the program, learning outcomes, and which of our industry partners can we weave into the experience. From that, we take care of all the aspects to make it really easy to jump in. That includes industry also coming to the table. They're hungry for new talent. They support the model as well as our people in DC and at the DOE. So part of it is we are helping to bring and connect educators and industry through more scholarships, through funding that's coming in, Perkins funding as well, grants, things like that. Workforce boards have also been a big proponent of this model. And then we also have our open enrollment programs, which we do have scholarships available, but also group pricing. So we are able to take the cost down considerably. I think what's really cool, and I know Jessica and I have kind of circled the wagons, is an in-person experience like this would be, easily, $1,500 to $2,000 just to be able to travel, meet with industry and overnight and everything. The model now for one student is $399, and we are able to come down considerably from that for group pricing. So it's accessible in ways that we haven't seen before for especially a lot of our low SES students to be able to open their eyes to cybersecurity with the starting salaries that exist and the unprecedented support. It really has been just a marriage of purposes for everyone trying to be at the axis of this field and the opportunities it presents.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up? What if this is free for students if schools are not in a position to pay right now? The February 15th and the March 29th, are those free opportunities for kids?
We do have scholarships that we're building into the program through our support and our industry support.
Right.
So if you wanted to drop me a line, what I could do is share some of what opportunities exist,
Okay.
learn a little bit more about what you're building for your school
Great.
and your students, and open up some ideas and start a conversation.
Appreciate that. I hope the folks on this call have taken down Olin's number. So scholarships are available. Great.
Thank you, Reza.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to follow up with an email with all this information too, so you have this accessible. Thank you so much, Olin. Feel free to stay on if you'd like or hop off.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Reza, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so we have a survey that we'd like for you to fill out. We've talked about this a few times that we're really interested in keeping the community going here. And we would love to kind of assess what you think you may be doing with this curriculum moving forward. If you're going to use all of it, if you're going to use part of it, if you'd like to continue to be part of conversations moving forward. So I'm going to ask someone to go ahead and put that link in the chat. Damian, if you want to put that in there, that'd be great. It's at the bottom of that document we shared. And yeah, we just would love to continue to stay in touch. Reza, what am I missing here? There we go. There's the form. Thank you.
The link is with you now. I just want to stress what we began our conversation with, which is that really we are so glad that you participated in this with us, and we really look forward to your feedback. But more than just beginning to get a sense and a feel for this curriculum, again, for us, it's maybe even more important than you getting the first couple of overview hours of the curriculum. It's for you to find each other and for you to continue to connect with one another. So we have created in this survey, and I've done a lot of survey work in the past, so we broke the cardinal rule of surveys for feedback by asking you to please give us your name. And that is not so that we can remember you if you give us a less than favorable assessment, which anything is fine. We really want to hear your feedback, but we're curious to see if you want to continue to be part of this community, if you want to be part of a space where we share information with you and we forward on opportunities such as the one that Olin has shared, which would be happy to do. So that's almost a yes, you'll be hearing from us in the future. But again, if what you just did in the last hour and a half was valuable and you think you'd like to continue that internally with teachers, we can facilitate that for you as well. So let us know about that. And I see that my clock just turned to 6:30, so we definitely want to let you go back to families, commence the evening, late as it may be. Thank you all so much for giving us our time, for giving us your energy. Last thoughts are always with our curriculum experts. So Damiana, Maurice, and Chris, any last parting words? And also, let's do this. Jessica and I are in a space where we often share love. So if you want to turn your mics off and give us some claps, I think that would be very much appreciated. So truly, thank you.
Thank you so much, Damiano, Maurice, Chris. It's been a pleasure. This is not the end, but I have to say it feels like a big moment that this is all coming to an end at the training that is. So thank you so much. And I can't say enough for how awesome it's been to collaborate with you, and you've gone above and beyond. And I feel like we're going to make some things happen here with the DOE and the CT program. So thank you so much.
Y'all can't get rid of me. I know your names. You can try, but this is on record, so I'm sorry. I'm coming for you all.
I'm glad it's being recorded, so when I reach out to you, you can't hide either.
Stacey, I would never. You're welcome to visit anytime. I will come down to Chelsea if need be. Once I'm over my quarantine.
All right,
Thank you,
excellent.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Take care now.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.